Again, this is Brian Kelly speaking. Thanks for your participation today. CloudGenera's webinar focused on cloud cost planning. Today, we're going to walk through the following agenda. First, we'll start by providing an understanding of the current cloud cost planning ecosystem, an understanding of what's available in terms of tools and in terms of process to help businesses with better cloud cost planning. Then we'll transition to two topics. First, topic focused on optimizing existing applications for the cloud. It's clear to most businesses now that there's a challenge when you attempt to migrate applications to the cloud. The lift and shift strategy in particular is something that we'll touch on briefly, but we'll spend most of our time focused on opportunities to achieve better economics of leveraging cloud services. Specifically, how businesses can better take advantage of pay for use and non-production, how businesses can ensure they're getting the best price for performance, and third, how businesses can take advantage of existing investments as they transition workloads to the cloud. The second topic will focus on avoiding unneeded expenses for born in the cloud applications or new application deployments in the cloud. The challenge in this arena is cloud makes it very easy to deploy, but it's very hard to predict and to govern costs. So in this part of the webinar, we're going to focus on opportunities that allow businesses to select the right worker node configuration for containers. This is a highly specific use case, but one that we see as being very prevalent in the market these days. We're also going to discuss how leveraging PaaS alternatives to infrastructure can help avoid costs. And last, we're going to introduce a new topic from CloudGenera, the ability to forecast spend optimization opportunities based upon the usage of cloud. Let's dive in by focusing on today's cloud cost planning ecosystem. Today, CloudGenera is one of the few players in the market that focuses on predicting future expenditures in cloud and finding opportunities to optimize expenses associated with cloud. That said, there are alternatives available in the market. Alternatives such as vendor tools, like the Amazon Cost Explorer and the Microsoft Cost Management Solution, and Google's providing BigQuery as a way to aggregate your historical usage and your billing. Frequently, these vendor tools are complemented and supplemented through the use of spreadsheets and consulting. And that's really because today's cloud cost planning ecosystem focuses on a specific vendor, and it focuses on historical views of your spend. And while these vendor tools are providing some simplified forecasting capabilities, they lack the intelligence to predict how to optimize spend and how to best plan for costs associated with cloud usage. In addition to the vendor tools and the spreadsheets that are available in the market, we still see several businesses not being proactive in their approach to cost planning. And this is resulting in budget overruns as well as unneeded expenditures. Conversely, CloudGenera's point of view is that as a company, we want to provide an unbiased view of the market. And that unbiased view should not have a bias towards vendor, nor should have a bias towards operating model. Think private cloud versus public cloud when we say operating model. CloudGenera also envisions a world where this type of analysis can be automated. You shouldn't need to stitch together multiple tools and manual process and manual effort to determine if you're getting the best value for your spend, to determine if you've planned appropriately for the expenses you're going to generate as a business. So CloudGenera provides visual analysis that's automated, including automation around staying current with what the providers are offering in the market. CloudGenera is also forward-thinking in its approach to cost planning. What should happen versus what has and will happen. CloudGenera thinks of itself as the windshield, showing you the options ahead, where most of the tools in the cost planning ecosystem today focus on the past. The combination of these values of being agnostic, automated, and forward-thinking provide a value that shortens time to decisions. So with CloudGenera, our tooling, our platform helps people discover, analyze, and identify actionable outcomes quicker. Now let's talk about the first of our two topics today related to cost planning. First, let's talk about optimizing existing applications for the cloud. If you're not a born in the cloud company, you have existing investments in technology. Those investments might be running in data centers you operate or own. They might be running in a co-location facility. They might be managed by an outsourcing organization. What we've seen over the last several years is that there is a true cost to lifting and shifting those existing investments to cloud. Those existing technology investments, when lifted and shifted to the cloud, typically double an organization's annual total cost of ownership. The good news is that it doesn't have to be this way. Even without rewriting and replatforming your applications, there are techniques, there are strategies that you can implement to optimize your costs when moving workloads to the cloud. And the first tip we're going to talk about today is implementing automation so that your so that your business can benefit from pay-for-use cloud licensing models. As a bit of background, the biggest opportunity CloudGenera sees in the market is around non-production environments. These environments are rarely used 24 hours a day and 365 days a year. In fact, our data from analyzing hundreds of thousands of applications per year suggests that these environments typically are used 50% of the time or less. Yet when businesses migrate applications to the cloud, they're rarely implementing the automation that will enable those businesses to benefit from pay for use. The solution? CloudGenera advocates documenting the frequency and duration of usage for these non-production environments. By doing so, your organization can identify the potential to eliminate costs and at the same time justify the investments that are needed to implement the automation that will allow your business to benefit for pay for use in the cloud. Here on this slide, there's an illustration of a single virtual machine and the difference between letting that virtual machine run all year long in a reserved instance running in Microsoft Azure versus implementing automation so that that workload is instantiated and decommissioned when it's needed for use and when it's no longer needed for use. That could translate in this simple example to over 50% savings, total cost of ownership on an annualized basis. This is a very common use case that clients utilize the CloudGenera platform for. One of our clients, a top 5 American insurance company, performed an analysis to look at their non-production workloads. And what they found was that transitioning their non-production workloads from perpetual use to on-demand service models in Azure generated over $7.5 million in annualized savings. Several months ago, when money was cheap and everybody's focus was on growth, opportunities like this may have been de-emphasized. Today, in a recessionary climate, what we're seeing is much more attention being paid to the spend, not just in cloud, but across the board for businesses. Leveraging this technique of implementing automation so that non-production environments are only running when they're in use can drive real savings for a business. And here in this example, you can see it's a 51.85% savings opportunity. After investing $2 million in automation, business is still saving $7.5 million a year. In that first year, they would net over $5 million in savings. So real money, real opportunities to save by implementing automation. And of course, the CloudGenera platform helps you visualize the business case to drive that investment to achieve that benefit. The next cost planning tip we'll talk about is securing best price for performance in the cloud. Unlike the data center, where operations limit the number of configurations that are available to the technology consumer, cloud providers offer a large number of highly variable price for performance options for common configurations. Here, what you're seeing on this slide is a subset of the instances available from Amazon that look like a very common data center virtual machine configuration. 4 cores of CPU and roughly 8 gigabytes of RAM. And to be clear, this is not all of the options Amazon offers in this configuration type. This is just a subset focused on the most common general purpose and compute optimized instances available. And what you'll notice as you scan the tiles on the screen is that there's very large variability in these very similar offerings. From a general purpose compute A1 instance that's a little over 10 cents an hour to an early generation in the C series, the C3X large, that's 21 cents an hour. That's 50% difference for essentially the same configuration of technology. Now, of course, what sits under this technology is what makes the price different and what makes the performance different. And it can be daunting to try to sift through all of the different options available in even just one provider. And those options vary across data centers. It's one of the reasons CloudGenera advocates performing a regular review of the available options to ensure your organization receives the best price for performance for your workload needs. And again, informed workload placement can reduce TCO by up to 50%. And in some cases, it's really as simple as making sure that as your workloads are deployed, you're paying attention to when new generations of similar technology configurations are made available by the provider. Leveraging CloudGenera's platform, you can automate this analysis, but of course, going directly to the vendor's websites and on a regular basis, querying what's available is a manual approach to achieve the same outcome. But as we like to say at CloudGenera, the juice is definitely worth the squeeze because 50% total cost of ownership scaled across a large portfolio of technology spend will translate to real savings. Here's an example of another client of CloudGenera's that leveraged the CloudGenera platform to assess if they were getting the best price for performance for their workloads. This particular company is a healthcare data services provider, so they're an exchange of healthcare information. For this particular client, already running in cloud, relicensing and reconfiguring their existing deployment to take advantage of the latest generation of compute configurations and to identify where committed use licensing would provide a benefit, generated over $820,000 in annual savings. And note that the cost of transition is negligible, meaning if we're just talking about relicensing and we're talking about reassigning the workload to the appropriate instance configuration, these are not big ticket items to drive real meaningful savings for a business. For this particular client, it took a $2.9 million annual total cost of ownership in the cloud and drove that down to $2.1 million, a 28% savings through an initial pass, an initial look, leveraging the integration CloudGenera has with Google BigQuery and being able to analyze that bill. And CloudGenera has similar capabilities for the likes of Amazon and Azure. Now, let's talk about the third cost planning tip. And this one surprises a lot of folks that they miss it. Taking advantage of existing investments. One of the things that's an afterthought for many organizations is that they may have already invested in existing skill sets and existing software licenses that could give them a benefit when they migrate workloads to the cloud. Again, organizations frequently miss this opportunity to maximize the return on those investments. And of course, the vendors don't always make it easy. But at the same time, there are tools and there are techniques out there to make sure that you're getting that benefit when moving to the cloud. The solution, by taking advantage of bring your own license models in both public cloud, as well as in hyperconverged infrastructure as a service solutions, such as Dell Apex or HPE GreenLake, organizations can save up to 30% annually. In this example, we're actually taking a look at a live demonstration of CloudGenera's cost planning capability. This is a new product for CloudGenera that practitioners can use to enable better FinOps cost planning inside their organization. This interface allows you to specify virtual machines, physical servers, networking, different types, sizes, and performance of storage. And then also allows you to provide comparisons across different providers. And so in our use case here, we're going to showcase the benefit associated with this bring your own license opportunity. And so we're going to look at one virtual machine that has Microsoft Windows Server as a requirement. And then we're going to look at a second virtual machine that also requires Windows Server, but is looking for options where you can bring your own license. So what we'll do is we'll now run a cost analysis comparing Amazon in Northern Virginia, to Microsoft Azure, also in Northern Virginia. So both of these are Eastern US data centers. When we run the analysis, what the engine will do is we'll take those specs and it'll generate for us total cost of ownership associated with supporting those specs in the two providers selected. Now, again, we didn't have to compare providers if we didn't want to. We could easily compare different license models or different data centers inside a single provider. But what does this analysis tell us? First and foremost, there's significant savings associated when moving from a purchase the license again to build your own. In Amazon, that savings is several $100s per year, tens of dollars per month in savings. Same is true for our friends over at Microsoft Azure. And you can see both Azure and Amazon are very comparable for bring your own license. The nuance is that Microsoft has a program that they call Azure Hybrid Benefit. That's what AHB stands for. The power of CloudGenera is you don't have to specialize in any one vendor or all the different offerings and the way they're configured. With our platform, you define your requirements, you define your needs, you let the engine do the work to determine what will generate the best outcome for the needs of your business. That concludes the first aspect of the cost planning webinar today. The second scenarios that we're going to walk through are areas where, whether it's a new application or an existing application, through cost planning, we can find ways to avoid unneeded expenses. The cost of unplanned cloud spend. And this couple sentences here is taken directly from FinOps.org's website. Cloud spend is variable, which is inherently difficult to predict, meaning engineers can start workloads anytime, typically without having to go through governance or without having to go through procurement process. This is translating into budget overruns. This is translating into unexpected expenditures that businesses now have to find a way to account for. So for all the agility and all of the time to value made available by cloud and how it's really empowered the consumer of technology, there are also inherent risks that without intelligent cost planning, you could generate expenses that were not only unplanned, but things that you don't have the budget to pay for. And those could be, critical issues for a business of any size. So now in cost planning tip 4, let's talk about some of the ways that we can be proactive in planning when we're going to deploy new workloads. And a very common, very popular use case today centers around the notion of containers. Containers have become a preferred method of deploying and managing cloud workloads. They give you portability across cloud providers and cloud provider data centers. They give you a lower risk, lower cost model, because when you're done with the workload, you blow it away. And when you bring it back, it has the latest and greatest tech if you're leveraging containers correctly. And so there are a lot of advantages to leveraging containers. One of the critical aspects of predicting costs associated with containers is the selection of the correct worker node size for your container environment. And if you follow the different vendor websites, you'll see that there's a lot of good technical information that can guide you to how to functionally stand up a container environment, but very little insight provided on what's the best economic approach to standing up containers for your environment. The solution, through estimation of total capacity required and evaluation of the available worker node configuration options at your preferred cloud provider, you can reduce total cost of ownership for your container environment by up to 50%. Here's an example of a large health insurance company that's leveraged the CloudGenera platform to perform this exact analysis. Leveraging CloudGenera, they were able to estimate their total cost of ownership running their containerized environment in 2 different instance types. a 32 core configuration and a 64 core configuration, and observe the variability in price. Who would have thought that the smaller machine size would have resulted in $4.5 million worth of expense versus a larger instance size, which actually comes in at 1.5 million less. Again, this is a real world scenario with real monetary impact to a business. For this particular health insurance company, selecting the right node size for their scale and capacity avoided over $1.5 million in annual expense. And the analysis also took into account the labor associated with supporting that infrastructure that houses the containerized environment. So managing double the machines had higher labor cost and a higher fee for running those compute services than running a larger shape. And that larger shape required less instance quantities, which in turn translated to less labor. So all the way around, better savings. The challenge without CloudGenera is that this analysis is manual. Or if you follow the vendor specs, their functional specs guide you to small node sizes because they're only focused on the function. They're not focused on the total cost of ownership. So again, with the CloudGenera platform and doing proactive cost planning, you could visualize ways to avoid expense before it's incurred. And $1.5 million could fund a lot of headcount and could fund a lot of projects. Not a lesson you need to learn the hard way, which is not planning and spending the money to learn the lesson. Next, let's talk about cost planning tip number 5, leveraging PaaS alternatives to infrastructure. This is not a new concept. In fact, for many years, organizations have had the opportunity to take advantage of platform as a service alternatives to infrastructure. As background, cloud service providers offer a platform as a service alternative to common middleware run as infrastructure. The most popular is the Relational Database Management System, or RDBMS. PaaS solutions aren't always the best fit. Sometimes they're limited by software versions, and they're limited by technology dependencies. But for workloads where the database can be isolated, can run on its own, vendors often provide a platform as a service alternative to comparable infrastructure. The tip from a cost planning perspective, performing a regular review of software versions, technology dependencies, and the availability of PaaS alternatives to infrastructure can present opportunities to reduce costs and eliminate OS management labor, resulting in up to 75% annual TCO savings. And that may seem like a very large number, but in fact, it's truthful when you look at the estimated total cost of ownership to run a workload as infrastructure, either in the data center or the cloud, versus running that same workload in a platform as a service alternative. Here's an example of a very large US electrical utility that's performed this analysis on their database workloads. And you can see here, this is a comparison of 3 different Google license models. And you can see the benefit is substantial. Leveraging an RDBMS PaaS as an alternative to infrastructure for their 100 SQL Server and MySQL database instances is stripping $390,000 in unneeded annual expense from their operation. And again, not all databases are going to be a fit for platform as a service, but the point is with better cost planning, you can identify platform as a service. You could identify a bring your own license opportunity. You could also find equally performant but smaller configurations available in the cloud as alternatives to your infrastructure-based approach to running relational databases. Now, our last cost planning tip, tip 6 in the session. And this is a very hot topic today, especially in the FinOps community. As we discussed at the beginning of this section, cloud costs are variable, and that as such, they're very hard to predict. It's hard to predict, are you getting the best value of your spend right now? It's hard to predict what your future budget is going to be based upon a forecasted spend for your workloads moving forward. Forecasting cloud provider consumption as product or service consumption requires very specific data and tooling to be consistently available. Billing and reporting from cloud providers is difficult to understand. And it's also difficult to explain to traditional finance teams. Those teams are used to CapEx. They're not used to fractional share of services. The solution, by proactively enabling monitoring in your cloud environments, you can gather historical usage data that can then be leveraged to right-size current operations and predict ways to budget/optimize future spend. And this is the second demonstration in our webinar today. We're going to take a look at an existing Tanzu deployment. And for those of you who are not familiar with Tanzu, this is a brand from VMware. It's their brand for doing container management. And also in this demonstration, we're going to focus on the current state, as well as a right-sized recommendation and a forecast for this Tanzu environment. First, let's focus on what's currently deployed. Currently, by vendor specification, there's 4 cores of CPU and 8 gigabytes of RAM allocated to this workload. CloudGenera, through its API, has an integration to multiple monitoring platforms. And in this particular example, we're showcasing our integration with Virtana's Virtual Wisdom offering. Leveraging CloudGenera's API to gather utilization data, whether it comes from a third-party product like Virtual Wisdom, or it comes natively from like an Amazon CloudWatch, or Microsoft's performance monitoring software, or through other third-party products, you can gather that historical view of usage. In this case, what you can see is that through leveraging Virtual Wisdom as a data source, we've identified the average usage and peak usage for this workload is 0.35% of what's allocated. So we're allocating 4 cores, and 95th percentile, we're leveraging less than 1 core. The larger the data set, the smarter CloudGenera will be at recommendations around utilization, both right-sizing current environment, as well as trending and predicting forecast for a future environment. With this utilization data, in the CloudGenera platform, you can plan for either immediate opportunities to save money, in the case of driving a right-sizing of the current environment and specifying your threshold and tolerance for performing that right sizing. You can also generate and create a forecast. So predicting in the future when you may need a different instance and what your expenditures may look like in that future state. For the sake of time in our demo here, we've gone ahead and run 2 models. Again, let's come back to the original model. Our current state was a 4x8 configuration. And in that 4x8 configuration, we know we're leveraging a good percentage of the memory. We understand that we're leveraging a good percentage of the storage, but we've identified an opportunity to reclaim capacity by downsizing, by right-sizing the CPU allocated to this machine. And so running CloudGenera's predictive cost planning model, first, we're able to identify a way to right-size that machine. So moving 4 cores down to 1 core. What's the business impact of that change? We're going to do a comparison of Amazon, Azure, and Google. But again, if you wanted to focus on a single provider, if you wanted to focus on data center alternatives to cloud, all of that's supported within the platform. When we generate a scorecard, it's going to take that right-sized recommendation and compare it across the 3 providers. And observe each of the 3 providers, we would save money by moving down to an instance type that only has 1 core versus the 4 cores we had originally allocated. Next, let's talk about forecasting. From a forecasting perspective, we predicted growth in the future. Here you can see that over time, we're predicting that we're going to need 5 cores as opposed to the 1 we right-sized to over the next 18 months. In addition to the 8 gigs of memory allocated today, we're going to need an additional 3 gigs of memory based upon the trend of our utilization. CloudGenera is unique in that it's not just doing right sizing. There are other products in the market that can do right sizing, but the ability to bundle right sizing as a way to plan for costs and save money today with the opportunity to predict and forecast future needs, either more instances or scaling up the instances that are already configured. This forecasting capability is unique to the CloudGenera platform. And again, to make it actionable, once we've estimated that additional capacity, we can rerun our analysis and observe, what was a few $100s is now creeping up to $2,000. But the whole point in proactive cost planning is that both the right sizing and that 18-month forecast are less than what we're spending today. And that's the key point. With proactive and continued cost planning, whether you leverage CloudGenera platform or other tools, you have the ability to find ways to save your business money now, and you have an ability to predict what has been hard to predict up until now, which is what that budget's going to look like in the future. What the configurations that will best give you a price for performance that meet the needs of your workload look like in the future. Now, let's summarize what we just chatted about in the last 30 minutes. With regards to optimizing existing applications for cloud, implementing DevOps automation to achieve pay per use in non-production can save 50 to 75% annually. We see this consistently across our customers. It's one of the most immediately actionable ways to reduce your cloud bill. Next, we talked about selecting the best instance for your workload. Companies like Amazon and Microsoft and Google are giving you way more options than you ever had available to you in your data center. That's both a blessing and a curse. The blessing is that you have more options. The curse is that you need to be proactive in making sure that you're leveraging the best options. When you're procuring hardware for a data center, you're probably locked into that hardware for many years, maybe 5 years, maybe 7 years. In the cloud providers are taking advantage of new instances from Intel, from AMD, from NVIDIA on an ongoing basis. And so the generations of technology that are available to you, the price for performance that you can achieve, and thereby the savings opportunity for your business is measurable and real. You could save up to 25 to 50% total cost of ownership by being proactive and doing the needed research to make sure that the initial deployment is the right deployment. And frequently it's not going to be the case. Again, because these cloud providers are evolving so quickly and they're able to adopt technology faster than was traditionally available in the data center. Third thing we talked about with regards to optimizing existing applications for cloud, taking advantage of your existing investments. And as you saw in our illustration in the cost planner demo from CloudGenera today, that could reduce annual total cost of ownership up to 30%. In fact, we showed one example that was over 30%, 50% savings by leveraging Bring Your Own License. Not available just for operating systems, but for certain vendors, also available for platform as a service. Second, we talked about avoiding unneeded expenses for born in the cloud applications. And the first use case we talked about is the container use case, where selecting the right worker node configuration can have real measurable impact on your expenditures associated with containers. In fact, using proactive cost planning techniques to ensure that based upon the scale and the capacity you need, you are sized appropriately, can avoid up to 50% total cost of ownership. Second, in this area, we talked about leveraging PaaS alternatives to infrastructure. We talked about the nuances of making sure that if you have a database that doesn't require additional services to be installed on the same operating system, that you might benefit from platform as a service. And as we see in the data, that benefit could be up to a 75% reduction in annual total cost of ownership to support that middleware workload. And lastly, the demo we just saw is forecasting spend optimization opportunities based upon usage trends. And the key point here is avoid the unexpected expense. By being proactive, you can have a budget that feels more real versus just a hope as a strategy that you're allocating the right amount of capital to support your future cloud needs. And by leveraging this forecasting capability to also look at your current state, you can find ways to optimize spend today. And as we discussed, in recessionary times, immediate opportunities that don't require huge investment are a godsend to reduce costs and to save jobs. Now, if you're interested by any of the 6 tips that were presented today, or you have other use cases that you're interested in, an offer from CloudGenera, feel free to start proactive cost planning today at no cost by going to cloudgovernance.cloudgenera.com. There, you could take advantage of pre-populated content that we've published to our cloud governance portal to help you make better cloud cost planning decisions. And if you'd like, extending beyond these pre-configured content, you could sign up for a 2-week trial of the CloudGenera platform and get access to the cost planning utility that was demonstrated earlier in the webinar today. And that utility would be excellent for modeling your own application designs, your own workloads, and comparing the different providers, the different data centers, and the different license models that are of interest to your business. To close, thank you so much for attending our webinar today. Before we wrap, we're going to open up the chat for some questions.
Hey, Brian, we had a number of questions come in with registrations, and I think you've covered a few of them. One of those questions had to do with how often is the content updated?
Oh, excellent question, Owen. Our content is updated continuously. One of the benefits of CloudGenera's approach to cost planning is that we are continuously taking in the latest and greatest pricings and configurations available from the cloud providers. And we supplement that with co-location and hyper-converged infrastructure as a service alternatives that folks may choose to run in their data center. And so this is an ongoing process built into the CloudGenera platform where we are querying the providers, we're identifying when they've changed prices, when they've added new offerings, and then those learnings get updated into the data service in real time.
Hello, Brian. There's another question that just came into the chat. Is there enough market differentiation to justify an in-depth planning process?
The short answer, Jim, would be absolutely. As showcased in a few of the examples today, these prices are highly variable. And differentiation is not just price, it's capability. And that's why we talk about price for performance. We talk about the best value for the spend, not the cheapest options. And so with all this variability, even within a provider, not just across multiple providers, there's definitely justification to do this in-depth planning. And as you saw showcased in some of our case studies of clients, this is not trivial savings. 6-figure, 7-figure annual savings. You know, again, that's real money that can fund other aspects of the business.
Excellent, thank you. There's another question here that we actually get quite often, so I'm just going to bring it up. If I've already chosen a cloud service provider, does your product have any, value or applicability for them?
Absolutely. In fact, CloudGenera uses its own platform to optimize its use of cloud. And while we may run in multiple cloud providers today based upon the nature of our business, leveraging the product when you've locked in on a particular provider is just as beneficial as when you're trying to compare multiple providers. You know, we regularly find ways to optimize our spend around containers, which is one of the use cases we talked about today. We've been a direct beneficiary of transitioning infrastructure to cloud native services, which we discovered through leveraging our platform. It helps us on an ongoing basis and has become a part of our FinOps discipline internally.
Yes, so we just got question just come in. Where can we find documentation related to the various CloudGenera capabilities you talked about today, Brian?
There are a few resources available to access documentation related to the CloudGenera platform. A lot of rich information exists on go.cloudgenera.com. And there you can find our white papers, you can find case studies, you can find product descriptions about the platform. And then I would also direct you to CloudGenera's YouTube channel, where we frequently are posting new videos and new content that showcase the platform's capabilities and how a business can benefit from leveraging CloudGenera to be proactive in their governance as well as their planning for cloud spend.
Excellent. There's another one that just came in. How can I explore additional use cases to what you've already shown us, Brian?
So if there are additional use cases above and beyond what you've seen today, as I mentioned on the prior slide, please feel free to go to cloudgovernance.cloudgenera.com. There you can access our cloud governance portal at no cost and try out different use cases, compare different providers, look at different application types. And then of course, the 2-week trial that's included at no cost. By signing up for that 2-week trial, you can get access to model any use case that you're interested in doing cost planning around.
Right, there's another one. Just give me a moment here. I just finished typing. All right, what market factors are you seeing driving customers to use your solution, Brian?
One of the largest market factors that we're seeing today is the inflation that all of us are feeling at home and the recession that's looming in the macroeconomic market. Months ago, money was cheap and the focus was on growth. And very quickly that has changed. The market dynamic has changed in favor of saving money. And that's been one of the biggest drivers for us over the last few months, are folks who are getting serious about their cost planning, getting serious about forecasting, getting serious about finding ways to optimize the spend. The macro level market and the challenges everybody's experiencing has been a big driver for leveraging products and technologies like those that CloudGenera offers.
Excellent, thank you. Another question here on FinOps. You're developing, what are you doing around the FinOps practice internally in your company? Do you have any products specifically geared towards FinOps? As that's continuing to be a big part of the cloud service provider market.
Yeah, from CloudGenera's perspective, we were FinOps before FinOps was cool. Our discipline has always been around helping people get the best value for their spend. And the first generation of FinOps companies have focused on show back and charge back. And those are things that you can definitely achieve leveraging the CloudGenera platform. Where we've seen a gap and where we're focusing on helping people is not in the rearview mirror, not in the reporting of the spend to show back or to charge back, but in the look forward. How can you get better at forecasting? How can you get better at planning? How can you avoid the expense as opposed to try to remediate the expense? These are the areas where we're pioneering as an organization. But all of the disciplines of FinOps we've implemented in our own product organization. In fact, we have a team leader who focuses on FinOps as a discipline to ensure that we're always getting the best value for our spend. And again, it's not just understanding our rates and understanding our usage. FinOps for CloudGenera and FinOps, as we've engineered it into our platform, is focused on the look forward. The how do we be proactive to avoid the unnecessary expense, to optimize the existing expense. And to the point of the question about do we offer products in this arena, there is a product specifically designed for the FinOps practitioner. And some of our customers call themselves cloud economists. And this bundle gives you access to some of the utilities that you were exposed to today. Cost planning interface, cloud governance interface, the ability to map and model very sophisticated transformations, not just migrations or optimizations.
Excellent. Can I, here's another, can I use your technology to compare against what I already have in-house?
Absolutely. One of the things we mentioned very briefly in the beginning is that CloudGenera does not have a bias towards vendor or service model. A very common use case for CloudGenera is to compare a current data center operation to public cloud alternatives and hyper-converged infrastructure as a service alternatives like Dell Apex and HPE GreenLake. So the CloudGenera platform is very well suited, in fact, uniquely positioned to help customers understand the unit economics of running the data center, running in co-location, and running in cloud. So absolutely, yes, you can compare your existing operation to those alternatives that are available in the market. That is a core value of ours.
Excellent. Owen, do you have one?
No, I think we've covered them.
All right, I just got one that just came in. When we talk about cost overruns, we do have cloud native solutions that provided advisories on right sizing of instance or optimization aspects of resources. How does CloudGenera differ from these cloud service provider native tools?
Yeah, excellent question. And so Amazon has the Cost Explorer, Microsoft has their cost management, Google has BigQuery. And when you look at those three tools as examples, they're very well positioned to report on the historicals. Again, how do I do chargeback? How do I do showback? Amazon's begun to introduce some simple forecasting capability, but nothing to the depth and the richness that is offered by the CloudGenera platform. So our differentiation continues to be being able to see the future, being able to recommend transformation, not just being able to visualize things that can be turned off, not just being able to do kind of a straight line forecast of, well, we pay this today, so we'll pay this tomorrow. The ability to optimize as a part of the forecasting function is what sets CloudGenera apart. The ability to not have a bias towards a particular instance type, particular data center, or particular provider, but to see the whole market in an unbiased way, again, is another differentiator of the CloudGenera platform.
Excellent, thank you. That's the questions that we have to this point, Brian.
Well, team, again, thank you so much for your attendance and your participation today. Great questions. For any of your peers who might benefit from this recording, we will be posting this on our social media and on our website. And we look forward to hosting you again in the near future. Our next cost planning webinar is going to focus on the economics of databases. So we're going to take a deep dive on one of those cost planning tips we talked about earlier in this session today, which is around platform as a service alternatives. But this will be a broader dialogue around the economics of databases in the cloud. Hope to see you there. And again, thank you so much for your time today.